Welcome back to another riveting episode of V8 Radio. I'm Kevin Oeste, joined as always with our co-host, Mr. Mike Clarke.
I am riveted.
You're riveted? like stuck to your chair, riveted? Or?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
This is another episode coming to you from the garage, actually stereo garages at this point.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I got the GTO behind me and just breaking my heart looking at it because it's all broke down.
Well, at least that's all behind you, so to speak.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, and likewise, I've got my 70 Buick and my Galaxie behind me. So,
Speaking of Galaxies, that muscle car of the week you posted, that 64 R code,
yeah,
427 car, yowza.
Yeah, that was a heck of a machine, huh?
That was a hell of a machine, absolutely. I liked it a lot.
That one, we had been talking about doing that car. The Brothers Collection is home to a bunch of cool Galaxies, a lot of convertibles, and they don't have very many just fastback hardtop 63 or 4s like that, those R-code cars. But I saw that one from across the room where they store these things, and I was like, "Holy cats! What?
Yeah.
Who? Not what? Who is that? You know?
Yeah.
Because
I got to get me some of that.
It just has such a presence about that car, and our crew and everybody was like, "That's a must do." So, very cool car. And if you haven't seen that episode, it's I think episode 190, if I'm not mistaken.
It's up there.
Yeah, and it's a 64 Galaxie 500 R code. It's triple black or double black, I guess. It's black exterior, black interior with a bench seat. 4-speed on the floor, 425 horse dual quad, 427. No options, no nothing. Just a brawler. It's cool.
Yeah, that's pretty slick.
Been getting a lot of good feedback on that one. It's been shared quite a bit. So, it's funny. You never know what people are going to dig and what they're not. Some cars you just know, and that one I kind of figured.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't even have to be a Ford fan to dig that car. That thing is just that's got it all. I mean, that's just oozes cool.
Well, and that's kind of the mission with that show, is not necessarily to be as brand specific as possible, but to kind of walk the line and show people that, even if you're a Mopar guy, and I know Mopar guys and gals are some of the most brand loyal, car fans. Almost next to the Pontiac guys, I'll say.
Almost. Almost.
But to kind of reach out to everybody and just kind of present something cool and say, hey, I'm not saying you need to renounce your loyalty to Pontiac, but check this one out, So.
Yeah. You can still be a fan of what you like and still like that car and other cars. I mean, you don't have to say, well, it's a Ford and blah blah blah, but I mean, you gotta give it to it. I mean, Ford put out some really good stuff.
Yeah, and
really good stuff, and that's a great example.
And we've gotten a lot of feedback from people saying, just that, hey, I normally don't even look at Ford stuff, but this one came across and it's like, wow. So yeah, that's cool. When we recently did a paint restoration on a 64 Galaxie in our shop. That it's not an original R code car like this one, but it is a Stroker 428 dual quad 4-speed car, and it's appeared in a couple videos. We did a Durali electric fan controller install on that one and a few things, and the owner's just a super cool guy. And the fun thing about that particular car is he takes that to the FE Ford reunion when he can and beats the tar out of it on the drag strip, and just drives it hard, and that's what you like to see.
Do you know what it runs?
I don't, because he's made some modifications to it since the last time. And in fact, it's back in our shop today getting a new cam and valve train to hopefully go a little faster. But
well, you're not far from Gateway Park. You just might have to take it for a couple test runs when you're all done.
Yeah, and that's a great suggestion. And we've done stuff over there in the past. The Gateway Motorsports Park is probably 35, 40 minutes from our shop. And you'd think we'd be there all the time. But the place is busy, which is good. And to get in on a test and tune, like a Wednesday night or whatever, if I have my druthers, I like to pool together a handful of people and maybe rent the track, on a weekday, and then just run all day, and
That could be a nice, cool V8 TV kind of a thing to do.
Yes.
Nice little event.
Exactly. And we have enough customers that like to run their cars, so that's something that that we should work on, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be a great idea.
Yeah.
Glad I thought of it.
You're glad you did. Yeah. No. Let me put that one on the list. So we started a practice of trying to incorporate a trivia question into this show, and
I'm going to mess you up with this trivia question.
You're going to mess me up with this one.
That's right.
Well,
it's going to blow your mind.
Because that's what I need right now is my mind, my mind to be blown. It's shot already, so when blow it up too.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you go first because as we're talking here, I am verifying mine because last time, one of them I wasn't quite sure. But,
did you ever find out for sure?
No, as a matter of fact.
No? Okay. Well, then you're right.
Yeah, how about
then
that?
you were right. Okay, here we go. All right. Now, believe it or not, this is slanted towards Pontiac, if you can believe that.
No, it's hard to believe for me.
I know. I'm such a Mopar guy. As most people know, Pontiac, in the GM family, Pontiac is always, from a production figure standpoint, Pontiac has always been little brother to Chevrolet, and typically coming into second place in sales figures to Chevrolet. And there was a brief period of time when Pontiac actually eclipsed Chevrolet in production figures. What year was the first year that happened?
Holy mackerel. That is a good one. Do I get any kind of a hint on this?
It was not in the 60s.
Yeah, that's what I figured. I'm going to say that it was 1958.
1958
is my guess.
That is a good guess.
Well, at least
we will find out at the end of the show
at least
if you were right or not.
In the ballpark on that one, because that I know that fact is true, that Pontiac has eclipsed Chevrolet, and I'm not super up to speed on like the chronology of every year's production sequence, and there's certain ones that I know because I've done some research on them. And in fact, I was kind of surprised to learn recently that there was like 1969 was a long production year because of a strike for GM. So production went far longer than normal before the 70 models were introduced. So there was like 260,000 69 Camaros made. I mean, just tons and tons of those cars.
Wow.
So those are the little production trivia that I know. Or they made, 3 of a certain car. But that's a good one. You're right. Well,
and for a bonus question on that is which in that same year, which manufacturer was number 1? So I'll give you extra credit for that.
Okay, well, in that case, I'm going to say if Pontiac eclipsed Chevrolet, and the way you sneakily worded that one to not say it was a GM manufacturer, I might say it was Ford.
Not a bad guess.
Yeah, okay. Didn't quite tip your hand so much as when I figured out the beep question.
I wanted to give you something.
Thank you for that. Well,
yeah, I'm glad you just didn't say AMC as part of the big 3. Dummy.
Just depends on who you ask. I tried to.
Yeah, I'm still kicking myself in the ass for that one.
Tried to skew that back in your direction by saying AMC fans definitely.
I know, you gave me every opportunity to recant that. I'm like, nope, it's AMC.
All right. Well, it just so happens that I have a Pontiac trivia question for you too.
Oh God, I better get this.
Yeah, you're going to get this one real easy, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so as you, of all people, are familiar, back in the late 60s, Pontiac had a program where they would drag race cars with the Royal Racing Team, and they, as a dealer promotion, they would bring out a pair of GTOs to a local racetrack, and they would have a mystery driver in a tiger suit that would race one car against either a lucky person from the audience, or a famous drag racer that was competing at that event that weekend. And it was just a kind of a crowd exhibition run. Well, many people were in that tiger suit over the period of this promotion, but who was the guy that they unveiled, kind of a famous guy that was wearing the tiger suit?
A famous guy.
Yeah.
Famous in the...
As far as what I understand as being the first official unveiling of a who's in the tiger suit. And it just so happened to be somebody who was pretty prominent in the car world. I'll give you
killing me, Smalls.
I'll give you that. Yeah. It's kind of like the early version of the Stig, where there's this guy comes in with the mask on and nobody knows who he was, but they did unveil him.
The only name coming to mind is Jim Wangers. He was the. I think he drove the GTO Tiger.
Jim, of course, worked in Pontiac advertising and was, I think, responsible for that concept, as a matter of fact, of having the tiger-suited guy and racing those cars.
Yeah, and he was definitely deep into it, but his is the only name that's coming to mind as far as being unveiled as the driver of the GTO Tiger.
Okay, that's your final answer, is Jim Wangers?
Yeah, god dang it, it's my final answer. I'm sure it's wrong again, but
I don't know.
See what happens.
We will see. Jim Wangers tried to brand that. He did such a great job of branding that GTO in so many directions. Last time we were kind of joking about hearing the song "Little GTO" and but that was his doing also. He was behind that, and of course the Tom McCann GTO shoes. You got a pair of those?
Yeah, yes. I
you ever see a pair of those?
Remember. I've never owned a pair of those.
But have you ever seen
them? At Tom McCann's? Yeah, I've seen them.
I've never seen them in person.
But yeah, I remember that was a giveaway. I think that car is still around too. It's in somebody's collection.
The GTO Tiger.
Right. Yeah. In fact, that GTO. There's Wangers has a replica of the GTO Tiger that still races.
Yes, and that's owned by Dave Anderson.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And in fact, many years ago in a previous life, I did an interview with Wangers and Jim Anderson, Dave Anderson, and a feature on that car out at the El Toro Naval Air Base in Southern California on the
sweet,
kind of like a drag strip setup out there, and it was so windy that we had to seat Mr. Wangers in the vehicle so that his
so his lid wouldn't blow away. Yes. His hat, as it were.
Part of his decor did not go down the drag strip without him. And he poked a lot of fun at it,
well, I'm glad he could laugh at himself.
He does laugh at himself. He's got a great attitude, and he talked about his toop, as it were, departing. And it was also for the wind noise, on the microphone.
Yeah, and Jim is still around. He comes out to our Pontiac GTO clubs, the Indian Uprising show every year, and he does a little seminar and signs autographs and stuff. So it's kind of good that he's still around and keeping things going.
Yeah, well, a couple of years ago was the anniversary. Well, 2014 was a big anniversary for GTO, and he toured everywhere. And that's cool. He's a great guy. He's fun to talk to. He's got a lot of great stories. Mm-hmm. At that same shoot, we had a production assistant that was responsible for holding up a big reflector. You always see those kind of behind-the-scenes shots. And she's a real skinny girl, and she's standing there, and it's so freaking windy out that she's having a hard time holding this thing. And no kidding, about a 3.5-foot diameter tumbleweed comes rolling down the the tarmac, and literally knocks her over. She didn't see it coming, she goes down. The reflector goes flying. Wangers is in there blowing in the wind. It was quite an adventure.
Oh my gosh!
And the kind of the bummer is a lot of those old episodes of Hot Rod TV that I did were pre-internet. This was like 97 through or 98 through 2002 or 3, and I don't know if those guys still have those episodes and have digitized them, because they'd be great online. I mean, they'd be fun to share.
It would be great online, yeah.
Here in my garage, I've got a shelf. Right up there is a box full of VHS tapes with some, but I don't own them. You know, they're not.
Oh, so you can't put them out.
Right. They belong
for public consumption. I got you.
They belong to Hot Rod. So,
well, dang it, call up Freiberger and say, listen, bro.
I should.
I need to air these.
Well, yeah, because he's in a whole bunch of them. We did a lot of TV episodes with Freiberger back in the day, and it's very different from Roadkill. It was more, magazine recreation on television.
Right.
But, there's another funny Freiberger story, and I don't know if I ever told you this one, but here in my garage on my wall, I have a picture that was taken on the Hot Rod Power Tour, and I have to remember to put this on the website so people can see this picture. But one year, it was, I don't know if this was 2000 or 1999 or so, maybe 2000. The Power Tour went through Albuquerque, New Mexico, and there's a local guy named Otto. Well, his real name is Chuck Anderson, but he goes by Otto. Otto Mechanic is his nickname.
Okay.
And he's a great guy. He's an old hot rodder, and he owned a hot rod shop, but he also had kind of a Wayne's World local access cable TV show, in which people would call up, with their automotive questions, and he would diagnose them on the air. And the way he diagnosed them often was he had a wheel that he would spin the wheel, and it was like the wheel of automotive failures, and. He had this fold-out set and everything, and it was a lot of fun. I still talk to him today. He's a great guy, and he invited the whole staff of Hot Rod to be on the show, because that particular night when we came to town was the night he was having his live TV show. So at that point, the crew was Steve Mignante, David Freiberger, Terry McGeehan, who's editor-in-chief of all the Hemmings magazines now, and myself, and a couple of guys from Otto's area that are friends of his. So the show didn't start until, 8 or 9 at night, and we were all sun-fried from being on Power Tour and everything else. And I'm telling the guys, I'm like, yeah, we got this invitation from this dude to do the Power Tour, or to do the a TV show and kind of promote the tour and everything. And they're like, yeah, I don't know, we're tired, it's been a long day and everything. So we finally convinced all these guys to go to this local TV station and go to the set. And the first thing that happens, that he lines up a whole bunch of chairs, and it's kind of like the typical late night TV show desk, except his desk is a flaming nose of like a 72 Honda, of course, because it's all hot rod themed. And we all walk in and sit down on camera live, because this is, again, it's local access. And I sit down, and Mignante sits down, and Freiberger gets this little tiny seat. And the first thing that happens is he sits down and goes over backwards, feet overhead, and he's laying on his back. Just made this grand entrance laying there on his can, But I have the picture that was taken at the end of that show of all of us sitting there. I'll have to post that because it was pretty fun.
Awesome.
And that one, I think I have a VHS of that show also, and I don't think anybody owns that anymore. So maybe I should... If I can digitize that and throw it up, that'd be kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
You know what I think would be a cool story? I don't know if you've ever put this out there in your you put out a big kind of a brain dump on kind of how you got to where you are today. I don't remember if you went into your story on going on the Hot Rod Power Tour in that Cavalier and all of the hilarity that ensued over that. On the what was it? It was the second Power Tour.
It was that was 1996. So the first one was 95, and it was like 17 cars,
Right.
And the way early days, and that's a heck of a story. It's funny that you mentioned brain dump. That was dump is definitely an appropriate word for where a lot of that story was. That was in my my Riviera thread on our website,
right?
Because sometimes I take the long way to get to the point.
Well, sometimes you just got to go through the process, man. Well, no shame in that.
Yeah, well, that particular one. The thread is about this Buick, and I think it's like 7 pages in before we even mention it. So I apologize to anybody who's had to sit through that. But part of that reason for doing that is, I'm not saying I'm getting old, but I do want to have a print document, history of this stuff before I forget it all. So, and these aren't stories that you tell every day. So, the whole Power Tour thing came about primarily from reading Hot Rod Magazine and seeing that coverage from the '95 tour and thinking how cool that was to do the open road trip. And my buddy Paul, who you obviously know, and Paul's a car guy the same way we are. He was the smart one that actually became an engineer and, was doing very well. And instead, I took my course. But the way this all shook out was it was New Year's Eve of 1996. So it was the last day of 95, right? And I was out of college. Paul was still in engineering school. And I was doing some freelance writing for a PR firm in Chicago, and I had done some radio work, but I wasn't good enough to actually be on the air in Chicago. I worked for a few different stations in college, but I just, I certainly wasn't there from a talent I didn't have it. So I'm kind of bouncing around between these little jobs, which meant I had some free time. And Paul, being an engineering student, had some free time in the spring and summer. So, we decided to make a New Year's resolution. And to this day, I can't guarantee that I remember this happening live because it was, a few minutes before midnight. And, we had a few drinks in us. And we were at the Tequila Roadhouse bar in Chicago, which I think is long gone. But that was a fine establishment we used to frequent. And Paul's like, dude, this year in 96, we're going to do the Power Tour. And I'm like, hey, that's a great idea.
Why not?
Why not? And at that point, I had my first 70 Buick Riviera, and it was in a million pieces, but it was December. I got plenty of time. The tour was in May. That gives me 4 or 5 months to put this car together.
It's a lifetime.
Oh, yeah, especially when you're that young and not very intelligent and pretty boozed up. So, and Paul had a 71 Nova, and the front clip was out of it and the motor and everything, but, so we both had a mission now at this point. So he amazingly locked in on that as a goal, and I kind of forgot all about it. And interestingly enough, because he was away at school, he came back for his summer break, and this was like end of May, and pulls up in front of my house one day with his daily driver 88 Chevy Cavalier, which was just a POS.
Oh, a fine automobile from the word go.
Yeah, and he shows up at my house and he says, all right, we got to go. And I said, okay, where are we going? And he's like,
you got to go to the store or something?
Yeah, exactly. You got to go to the can or something. He said, no, we got to be in Los Angeles in 2 days. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what are you talking about? And he's like, dude, you promised. I'm like, Come on, man, New Year's Eve. Yeah, right. What did I promise? He's like, on New Year's Eve, man, you swore you were going to do the Power Tour, and we got to go. And I'm like, oh man, I wasn't serious. I can't just go. What are we going to drive? Because of course I didn't really get anything done on my Buick, and his Nova was in more pieces than it was on New Year's Eve. And he's like, well, that don't matter. We'll take the Cavalier. I got my stuff in there. And I'm like, So at that point, luckily, I was a freelancer, so I could leave. I was living with my parents, so I didn't have any problem. And I think he had like $300 cash, and I had a credit card that I think would hold maybe $250 or something.
Fortune.
Oh, yeah. And in the back of his Cavalier, we got a tent and a camp stove and really nothing to our name. And I tell my dad, I'm like, I gotta go for a few days. And he's like, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Los Angeles. And he's like, what? And I said, well, Paul, I promised Paul, I have to go. I made a promise, I can't.
Man's got to keep his word.
Absolutely. So he's like, well, he wasn't very enthusiastic about it, but, I was...
Go imagine that.
I mean, I was 22 or 23. He was just happy to see me get the heck out of the house. So he's like, all right, see you later, So he said, do you have any money? And he said, do you have any Zort? That's what he used to call cash. And, he grew up in the 50s. And money was Zort, I guess. You're on these Zort? And I'm like, oh, I got this credit card with a couple $100, and he just kind of shakes his head. And I'm like, well, Paul's got all kinds of money. And of course, Paul told his dad that I had all kinds of money. So the saving grace was that the stupid Cavalier got like 40 to the gallon, so it was cheap to drive the thing. So we hit the road, and we left Chicago and headed west, and it was, again, the end of May, so it was kind of springtime weather, so the weather wasn't terrible, but our mission was we basically had to drive straight through to get out there to catch the beginning of the tour on time. And I remember driving through Colorado doing the night shift drive, and he's asleep and snoring and the whole thing, and it's so foggy I can't even see the end of the hood, but I have no option to stop, so
sure.
So we were both kind of half crazed from not sleeping and not eating properly and everything, and we make it to I think we make it to about St. George, Utah, or just west of the Rockies, and it kind of dawned on us what the heck we were doing. Because we're about to join what looks to be the premier hot rod event, on the planet. And back in those days, the 95 tour, I think, was pretty much an internal deal where they just invited a handful of people to go with them. And it wasn't really open to the public that much. It wasn't promoted as something you could join. But 96, it was on. They wanted to share it, and that's how we knew about it and everything else. So we're thinking this is going to be a great opportunity to see a bunch of killer cars, but we're driving a complete pile of crap, right? And what do we do, to not ruin their event is what we really wanted. We didn't want to crash the party. We just wanted to play along. Right. So we had this idea to just make fun of the car, and ended up we were the first ones to do it, but we bought a big giant box of Sharpies, and we bought some white shoe polish, and we nicknamed the car the Power Turd instead of the Power Tour, and just decided to let people sign it and have some fun with it. And we made it to L.A., and it was funny. I eventually lived out there, and I was trying to remember where we stayed when we got there. We stayed in this just seedy, dirty, flea-bitten hotel in Hollywood because we didn't know where to go. And the Power Tour that year kicked off from the Peterson. It was Peterson Publishing back then. The Peterson Publishing corporate office at 6420 Wilshire Boulevard in L.A. They call it the end of the Miracle Mile there. It's a nice part of town. And we couldn't afford to stay right there, so we just called around and found this crappy hotel in Hollywood. And have you ever seen the movie The World's Fastest Indian? About the guy that comes up from
I heard of it. I don't think I've seen it. No.
Well, if you ever get a chance to see that movie, I think this guy comes to America and stays in the same hotel. I mean, it's just terrible.
All right.
And we're lucky we lived through the night. Anyway, the tour then kicks off from the Peterson Museum, actually, not the corporate office. The museum was right down the street, and in their parking garage. And we get there, we pull in, and I think we had to pay $20 or something to get a hang tag and a sticker that signified that we were on the trip with everybody. And we're driving up the circular thing to get into the parking garage. We're looking around, and here's, there's Gray Baskerville, and there's Boyd Connington, and there's there's Jack Chisenhall from Vintage Air, and all these people that you see in the magazines. You're like, oh my gosh, this is the
that's slick.
It was awesome. These are the real guys. And again, we're in this toilet that we're driving. So we just kind of park the car. We get out, and we're kind of hanging around and looking at stuff. And pretty soon they make an announcement. They're like, okay, well, we're out of here. We're going to fire up and go. And the stop at the end of the day was in Vegas. And it's a nice drive from L.A. to Vegas if you do it on a weekday during the day. On the weekends, it's gridlock, between Vegas and L.A.
Yeah, I imagine, yeah.
Yeah, but during the week, it's nice. So we get in the car, and there's people directing traffic, which turned out to be Drew Harden, who was the editor of Hot Rod at the time, but I didn't know him then. And Drew is kind of pointing to cars and saying, okay, you go, and then you go next. And then he points to us. He's like, okay, you guys go over there to the other way, thinking that we were just like a pedestrian that was at the museum that day. And then I'll never forget, there was a 57 Chevy that was on the tour that was kind of primered and red with flames on it and everything. And I think we thought that was a magazine project car for Hot Rod. I thought it might have been Cole Quinnell's car or something. But anyway, that thing, we try to get next to that to maybe meet somebody. And Drew's like, okay, you go in the 57, and then you guys stay over there. And we were the last ones basically out of the building. And we're driving, and somewhere I have video of this, of us basically leaving the Peterson Museum, just ridiculing each other, cutting ourselves down, saying how much of idiots we are that we didn't get our cars finished and that we're here like basically peeing on the tomb of the unknown soldier. We're just desecrating to the highest degree.
We should be ashamed of ourselves, and we are.
That is exactly right. So we're going. The tour goes down Wilshire Boulevard, hooks a left on La Cienega, and it's going down towards the 405 freeway. Or towards the 10 freeway at that point. And it's a procession where the first car goes through, and because there wasn't that many, there was probably 35 cars or something at that point. They held the light, and everybody just went through the light as like I said, as like a parade. And then when we get up there, they're like, no, not you guys. So we're trying to figure out how to make this all, not offend anybody. So we get on the 10 and we start making our way out towards Vegas, and there's a couple of gas stops, and people start recognizing that, hey, these guys are still with us. And Jeff Smith was there, and Coddington and Baskerville were rolling in a bitchin' little 54 Corvette that Coddington just finished. It was black with open roadster, and they got headphones on going down the road, because it was cool. And here's another gas stop in like Riverside or something, and we're still with them, and we do a kind of a photo op for the whole crowd at the State Line Casino, which I think is in like Primm or Jean, Nevada, right at the state line of Nevada. And it's a big casino with a roller coaster that goes all around it. And it just opened at that point. And all the cars pull in, and there's like the BFG rig, full semi is going along for the ride, and all these cars park in a row, and people are getting out and taking pictures and stuff. And Paul and I parked the Cavalier at the other end of the parking lot, so that we're not ruining the picture.
Right.
And we walk around, we're talking to a few people, and it was weird because not only did we not fit in having this just junk car, but we really felt like we were outsiders because it seemed like everybody else knew each other.
Right.
And in those days, that particular power tour, I think a lot of the people were Southern Cal natives that were just maybe going to Vegas for the first night. It wasn't like today where people come from every country, to be there.
Oh, yeah.
So we were these two punk Midwest foreigners now, in the Southwest. We kind of kept to each other and, whatever. Well, the tour stop is in Vegas. We pull in. It was in a hotel parking lot at the Sands, I think, which I think is gone now. And it's a car show, and they got a DJ set up, and it very much resembled your local Friday night cruise. It wasn't like a big deal like it is today.
Sure.
But we got a chance to talk to some people, and I met Baskerville, and I met Todd Ryden, and Todd Ryden went on to be a tech guy. Actually was at the time a tech guy for MSD Ignition, and now he's with the Acceleration Media Group, and he writes freelance stuff for Good Guys and all kinds of stuff. The point there is that people that I met that day, I'm still friends with. This is 22 years later, 21 years later, and
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and a guy named Gus Stewart who was with Jet Performance back then and has gone through a bunch of stuff, and Gus had a very cool, like a '95 Impala SS wagon, right?
Nice.
So that was a car that was never built.
Yeah,
and
it should have been
totally, and he did it right.
Yeah.
It was all black. It had the wheels. It had it had like I think he had 20s on it even back then. And
I love those big bathtub wagons. Those things are beautiful.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like the Buick Roadmasters and all those. Oh, those are great.
Right, yeah. And done that way as the SS. He had the whole interior. I mean, it was killer.
Wow.
And
all right.
And he's like, hey, he was like the first person to be like, he was a sponsor of the trip, and he's like, hey, you know, what's your deal? You know, and we told him, we're like, yeah, well, we don't have our cars done, so we just took this. And he's like, hey, that's cool, man. You know, is it all right if we put a jet sticker on it? And I said, well, if you want to, you know. So he was the first guy to put a logo sticker on the car, which kind of was a stamp of approval. You know, we were okay all of a sudden, and
you were legit.
We weren't quite legit, but we were getting there, and he was super cool to us. And there was another guy that had a red Nova that was like the car that Paul was building at home, but finished. You know, and Paul's like, oh my God, look at that Nova, it's awesome. Yeah. And it turned out that it belonged to a guy, and it had a problem on the strip. I don't know if it ran out of gas or it was stuck or whatever. So a whole bunch of us got out and left the parking lot and pushed this Nova up the Las Vegas Strip to this guy's hotel, literally. And I'm glad you asked me all these stupid stories, because today they don't even sound like they actually happened. You know, they all sound like horse pucky. But here's 6 of us pushing this Nova up the Vegas Strip into a hotel parking lot. And one of the guys that was in the Nova was a gentleman named Steve Endham, who was a Hermosa Beach, California police officer, who eventually, when I moved out there, he and I hung out every once in a while. But they're like, yeah, thanks for pushing, guys. You know, can we give you a ride back to your hotel? And Paul and I are like, we don't have a hotel.
my tent's in the trunk.
Totally. And we were like ready to pitch a tent in the parking lot of the Sands, you know, casino. And he's like, well, why not? And I said, well, we're just, you know. So he's like, well, stay with us. So we're like, nah, we don't need to do it. No, really. And very cool guys. So they put us up for the night. We crashed on their floor and got to take the shower and everything. And the next morning hit the road, you know. So now we had done the official first overnight stop, and the staff guys from Hot Rod were starting to recognize that we were part of the deal. And then we ended up meeting a guy named Jeff Bolin, who was the representative for Split Fire spark plugs. And Split Fire that year had a street rod it was a giveaway car, and he was driving this thing, and I recognized him. Like, I think it was a Lobeck Roadster or something. It was pretty cool. And Jeff Bolin was sensitive to our cause, and he's like, you guys are great, you know, I'll put you up tomorrow night, you know, and we ended up hanging out with him.
Solid.
Yeah, it was, except he bought lots and lots of drinks. I mean, lots of drinks, because he's a sponsor and he's on a corporate expense account.
Right. Yeah.
And
Uncle Splitfire is taking care of everything, boys.
Oh, yeah. And you want to talk about, you know, Split and almost getting fired, you know. He did it up right. And he took great care of us and introduced us to other people, you know. So there was some side stories out of that night's stay, which was in Colorado. You know, the next day, Paul wasn't doing very well. But apparently, earlier that evening, before, you know, everything was really blurry, I was in the bar. Paul and I were in the bar with Jim Savis, who was the publisher of Hot Rod Magazine at that point. And he's like, "What's your deal?" You know, and we told him who we were and what we were doing, and he was like, "Yeah, that's cool," you know. And to this day, Jim Savis insists that I tried to pitch him on putting our Cavalier in the Peterson Museum at some point.
Well, with all those drinks in you, by golly, you may have.
Well, may is the word, you know. So apparently I did that, you know, but it left some kind of impression on Jim. And Paul and I ended up finishing the rest of the power tour, which ended up in Ohio. And if you think about that, from LA to Norwalk, Ohio.
That's a trip.
That sure was. And those were the days where you'd have, you know, 500-mile days on power tour.
Wow.
You know, which,
holy cow.
To tell you the truth, I really liked. You know, the shorter stuff is cool, but it's just so different today than it was back then. And so then we meet, you know, Troy Trepanier lots of other people along the way. And we pull into Norwalk at the last stop. And at this point, we had met Drew Hardin, who was editor of the magazine. And he was so gracious. And he's like, no, you guys park right in front with all the rest of the long haulers, and it was really taking care of us. And we ended up winning a trophy for the best beater. And
all right.
Yeah, right. And they printed a picture of the car in Hot Rod with Baskerville signing the hood, And
that's slick.
Yeah.
I hope you have that picture. Do you have that?
I do. I can put that up too.
Good.
Yeah, that was killer. So basically, Paul and I were on top of the world, from going from bottom of the sewer to
top of the heap.
Yeah, right. It was just an awesome experience, and we met all these people that we still know today. Well, that was 96, and by the time the 97 Power Tour rolls around, I had actually landed a real job. I was doing marketing for a chemical company outside of Chicago, naming products and doing that. And there's some more stories there I'm not going to get into. But I'm looking at the calendar and I'm going, Power Tour is right around the corner, and I would love to do this again. But now I'm a new employee. I'd been there 6 months or 3 months, and I didn't have vacation time, and so just a couple interesting things happened. Our friend Jeff Schwartz from Schwartz Extreme Performance it was long before he started that company, and he worked at the business across the street from where I was. It was in Vernon Hills, Illinois, and Jeff was running this metal fabrication business that did stampings and stuff. And he had his silver Cadillac. I don't know if you remember that Fleetwood two-door. It was a Fleetwood Brougham.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That had
nice car.
Very cool car. And when you talk about it in the Impala SS, it had all that SS suspension on it and everything. And so he was across the street. I was in this other place, and Power Tour's coming up. And just for fun, I called Jim Savis in Los Angeles because I don't even know why I called him, but his assistant is a woman named Peggy Medina, and Peggy has an Irish accent, so she'd pick up the phone, Jim Savis's office, and I'd say, yes, Jim Savis in. Let me ask who's calling. This is Kevin Oeste. And who are you? It's like, well, I'm nobody.
Just a guy.
I'm just a guy, And she's like, well, I'll tell him you called, So leave a message and nothing, And Paul's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know, So I called back. Jim Savis's office. Yeah, this is Kevin Oeste. Is Jim available? Yeah, I told him you called, but he doesn't know who you are. I know. But can you give him a message to call me back? I'll tell him, So finally, I think I called back a third time, and I said to myself, this is it. I'm not going to bother this guy, but I just want to express my thoughts that I had a great time last year, and I'd love to go again. And I'm, I guess in my mind, I'm trying to break it to him that he's not going to see me. Hey, Jim, we had fun last year. Sorry I can't make it, whatever. So I get him on the phone. Couldn't believe it. She passes me through, and he's like, of course, his hotshot magazine publisher in L.A. on the speakerphone, it's like, hey, Jim Savis, what do you need? And I said, Jim, it's Kevin Oeste. And he goes, Kevin Oeste, who the hell are you? And I said, well, I was on Power Tour last year. We met last year. He's like, yeah, I meet a lot of people. I'm like, yeah, I know. But he's like, well, what are you, were you at one of the stops or something? And I said, well, my buddy Paul and I were driving that white Cavalier. And he's like, I remember you. You pitched me on putting that car in the Peterson Museum. And I'm like, I did.
What?
Yeah, right.
What?
So he's like, yeah. What do you do now? And I said, well, I'm calling because Power Tour is coming up, and unfortunately I can't make it because I got this job working at this chemical company, and I can't go. And he's like, well, you should come to work for us. And I said, what? And he said, well, yeah. He said, you gave me a pretty solid pitch on putting that car in the museum. I mean, you could probably sell advertising or something. We could probably find a spot for you. You should come out here. And I'm like, you're kidding me. And he said, no. So I get off the phone with him. And Peggy's like, well, apparently Jim wants to have you do an interview. I'm like, oh, my God, you're kidding me, right? So he sets up an interview in the Chicago office. They had a Chicago office with a guy named Glenn Booker, and Glenn was the sales manager, I guess, in the Chicago office. And Glenn was such a cool guy. He, well, now I got to figure out how to make this happen because I just got this job, and it was a good job, and I didn't want to just ruin it. But at the same time, I wasn't happy there, and I might have an opportunity to work for Hot Rod. So, throwing all that out the window.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer.
So I tell Glenn, I can do this interview, but it's got to be after hours because I can't make it downtown in time during the day, dressed up nice and everything without raising any eyebrows. So he's like, yeah, sure, get down whenever you get down here. So I head down there and meet him, and I'm wearing a suit, and I got a tie on, and I'm trying to be all professional. I have no idea what I'm getting myself into at this point. And he says, tie? Really? You're wearing a tie and a jacket? And I said,
well, it's an interview, man.
Yeah, right. He's like, well, you could take that off. That's no big deal. And I'm like, okay, I guess. So I just kind of loosened my tie because I wasn't quite sure. I'm trying to not be a jag-off, basically. So, so we get into his office, and he's got, or a conference room kind of thing, and he's got like this mini fridge over there. And he says, well, before we get started, it's after hours. You want a beer? And I'm like, this is a test. This has to be. Because who drinks beers in job interviews? And I said, well, no, I'm good. And he turned. He's got the door open now, and he's reaching in, and he looks back, and he goes, well, I'm gonna have one. If you want one, it's cool. Yeah, all right. If you're gonna. So now I'm like, well, I don't want to fail the test and not have a beer with the guy.
I don't want to offend this guy.
Right.
Man's offering me a beer. I got to take a beer.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a beer, and we sit down at this table, and I got my resume all typed up and everything, and I'm trying to be all professional. And he said, well, there's the vice president of our division in Los Angeles, a guy named Ralph Panico, and he's Jim Savis's boss. And Jim and Ralph say I'm supposed to hire you, so what's your story? And I was like, wow. So I basically told him the Power Tour story that I just told you, and he said, you know what? You're the kind of guy we need out here. We need people that are willing to put everything aside and participate in our events, that get cool cars, that know what we're all about. So when can you start? I'm like, you are kidding me. So
wow.
Right. So for the first time ever, I got a job without having to prove any ability.
well, that last year's Power Tour was one hell of a job interview. It sounds like
it turns out that that's what it was. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Looking back now, if I was I guess I am a business owner, but if I had some kind of event like that and saw that somebody was either dedicated or dumb enough, I guess, to dedicate themselves to do this kind of thing, yeah, that says a lot about that person. I can see it now. Yeah. Back then, I couldn't see it at all. Mm-hmm. So they're like, "Oh, you got 2 weeks. Find an apartment and move out." So I basically packed up all my junk, and at the time, I had 2 cars. I had a '69 Riv, a tan one. That was a pretty nice car. California car, it was clean, drove nice, but it was a '69 Riv. And then I had an '87 Olds '98 Regency touring sedan, which was a nice car.
Sounds cushy.
Full leather, and it had the FE3 suspension on it and the big wheels and brakes. I mean, it handled great. Great car. It was a corporate lease car that I bought from a guy. And what's the right decision here? You're going to move across country by yourself, not know anybody, not necessarily even have a garage. Which car do you take?
And how old were you at this time? About 25 or so?
Yeah.
Yeah. The Riv is the right
That's
car.
That's exactly what happened. Right car, probably wrong decision, but that's what I took. Well, I wasn't going to show up at Hot Rod in an Oldsmobile family sedan from the 80s,
Yeah,
So
that's a good point.
At that same time, my parents decide to move from Chicago, and I was living with a buddy of mine, but storing all my junk in my parents' house still. But they decided to move to Arizona. So my dad's like,
oh boy.
My mom and my dad and I all kind of converged at the same time with the same news. Hey, guess what?
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, no, you're not going to believe. And they're like, no, you're not going to believe. And all at once we blurt out, we're moving to, and they say Arizona, and I say California. So so my dad's like, yeah, you got to get all your crap out of here because I'm not moving it, And by crap, I had a Craftsman vertical air compressor. I had all my tools. I had these 2 cars. I had a whole garage full of car parts, and I had my 70 Riv in a million pieces. What am I gonna do with all this stuff? So I ended up selling the Oldsmobile, putting a trailer hitch on the 69 Riv. And that's when I had to get rid of that 70 Buick, and my buddy Jim ended up with the vast majority of my old parts and all that kind of stuff, and hit the road. And 2 weeks later, I'm living. I stayed 2 nights with another friend of mine that lived in Orange County, and did a 3-hour commute each way.
Whoa!
Yeah, traffic was another level, and
3 hours. What was it? 20 miles?
Really, it probably wasn't that maybe 45. I'm going to say from Tustin.
Oh my God.
Tustin, California to Los Angeles. And the funny thing is I had no place to land, so I kept calling U-Haul because I had about a 14-foot U-Haul trailer on the back of my Riv. I kept calling them saying, I need this trailer for another day because I don't have anywhere to unload.
Oh my God!
I didn't have an apartment. I had nothing. I didn't know anybody out there. So, so I'm commuting with this Riv, pulling a U-Haul trailer, 3 hours each way to work and back, pulling a trailer
with a U-Haul trailer.
Right? Yeah.
Oh, that's priceless.
Yeah, and I'm like, hi, I'm the new guy. That's all my junk. Here's my POS Buick, and it's parked out in front on Wilshire Boulevard. What am I supposed to do with this? And they're like, well, you can't park that thing here, And they had an underground parking garage, which I did not have access to anyway, but I couldn't get a trailer down there. So I'm already on the outs with building security because I'm like, guys, can you just let me, leave this thing out in front? And U-Haul was like, sure, yeah, you rented that for for 4 days with unlimited mileage and a multi-state return, and that was like $60, but now it's $300 a day, to have this trailer.
Holy cow.
So I'm like, I got to do something, and I ended up finding an apartment in Culver City, which was right across the street, basically from the Sony production studios, and it was maybe 10 minutes away from the office, so that was good. And it was a studio apartment. And this is in 1997 now, for almost $700 a month for this one little room, and a parking place, and ditched the U-Haul and threw all my stuff in the apartment, and showed up at work, and they gave me a desk, and I started selling ads, and I knew nothing about it. I knew nothing about the advertising world or the print magazine world or how any of that stuff worked, and it turned out to be the beginning of what is still a tremendous career and just an awesome environment an industry to work in. And Paul was kind of pissed,
I make you go and you get the good job.
Totally, without a doubt, and especially at that time of our lives, and like I said, today he's extremely successful as an engineering superhero for International Truck.
Yeah, he's doing all right.
Oh, yeah, and that was, the two choices were to keep the Oldsmobile and be an engineer instead of drive the Riv and work for a car magazine,
Right.
So it worked out great, and to this day, that turned out to be the single smartest thing that I could have ever done. I can't claim that I intended to do that, so I'm not saying I was smart, because it truly just did kind of happen to me. Now, I took the initiative to do the tour on Paul's suggestion.
Right. Yeah.
But in many ways, I kind of feel like Forrest Gump, going along for the ride.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it sounds kind of Gumpish.
Right. Right place, right time.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, that's cool.
Here's this knucklehead who ends up, being in the right place at the right time.
Well, I mean, you took some steps too. I mean, you called that guy. I mean,
I did.
You kept calling and made that happen, and so that was a pivotal moment right there in a lot of all this as well.
Well, absolutely. I didn't really call him to get the job. I just called him.
Right.
So, and at that same time when I first called Savis, I had mentioned Jeff Schwartz worked across the street, and I never, at that point I was trying to plan on doing the 97 Power Tour for one stop or something because it came through Chicago and in Lansing, Illinois, and was going to Michigan that year. And it happened to be on a weekend, so I could actually do the Chicago to Michigan leg. And I saw that silver Cadillac across the street, and I called that business, and I said, hey, is there a guy there that owns that Cadillac? I asked the receptionist, and she's like, oh, that'd be Jeff Schwartz. Hold on. So she connects me to, and Jeff's like, this is Jeff. And I said, you know, Jeff, that's how he talks. And I said, Jeff, it's Kevin Oeste. I work across the street. And he's like, okay. And I said, I saw your Cadillac in the parking lot. He's like, oh, you're into cars? And I said, yeah, I got that tan 69 Riv across the street. He's like, oh, that car's cool. He said, are you going to do Power Tour? And I said, well, I can't go the whole way, but I was thinking about going to Lansing and then going to Michigan. And he's like, well, I can't go, but I have a hotel in Michigan. I'll give you the hotel. I said, you're kidding me.
Sweet.
That's how I met Jeff. He gave me a hotel room. That was the first way I met this guy, you know. And that was 22 years ago, and we're still buddies today, you know. So,
gee whiz.
Yeah, so a lot of things happened out of that Power Tour. Eventually, that's how I met my wife, Kelly, which is a story for another day. Cause,
that's a whole nother episode right there.
Yeah, it really is. But the moral, I guess, you know, as you were suggesting, the moral of the story is if there's something that you're into, you know, there's a great Wayne Gretzky quote where he says, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah.
Right? So
that is true.
Even if you have no logical reasoning for it to come true or to actually happen, the first thing you got to do is take that step, you know, and I was just, I guess, ballsy enough to do it. And
I mean, you had nothing to lose.
This is true. Yeah, I really had nothing to lose.
Literally nothing.
Yeah. Now, I probably couldn't do that today, you know, but...
Well, no, I mean, you're established and, you know, you have someone else to think about. And, I mean, back then it was just you pretty much, so why not?
Yeah, and the greatest thing about that was the reason why that was such a great move was not just because it was fun and because I got to work at a car magazine that I grew up reading and the coolness of all that. But by selling ads, what you end up doing is going through this big list. You got a territory, right? So my territory started off being the lower right third of the United States, and I was responsible for those little half-inch ads in the back of the magazine. You know, at the time they called it the performance directory. The little black and white, you know, name and phone number is basically all it was. I wasn't selling classifieds like if you're going to sell your car, but these were to companies. And I had this list of companies, and I just had to call them all. Start at A and end up at Z and call them every month. Hey, this is Kevin from Hot Rod. You want to run an ad in the magazine? No. Click. Okay. Go to B. Hey, this is Kevin from Hot Rod. You want to run an ad? So I learned, you know, now I was getting hung up on by everybody and not just when I was trying to call girls, you know. So I had to learn how to handle all that. But my angle, I wasn't necessarily the world's best salesman, but what I was able to do is... Now I'm starting to, it's my job to call these companies that I had looked up to. So, you know, at one point I had Art Car Transmissions. So I got to call Art Car, you know, that's cool. Get to call Kenny Duttweiler. It's my job, you know, and the list goes on and on and on. So I got to meet all these people, and instead of calling them up saying, hi, I'm Kevin from Hot Rod, do you want to buy an ad? I learned that most of these businesses, they were working on something before they picked up the phone. So I would ask them, you know, this is Kevin from Hot Rod. What are you working on? Well, what do you mean? Well, what'd you put down to pick up the phone? Oh, well, we're developing this new lockup overdrive converter for Grand Nationals. Well, that's awesome, you know, and I wanted to learn about it. And then it was, well, if you want to advertise it, I can help, you know. So luckily, those turned into some lifelong relationships that helped us start V8 TV, and today, I mentioned Todd Ryden before. I deal with him all the time, and the guys at Holly, and that's where I met, you know, all these industry contacts, which turned into something that I never anticipated either. And that's when if we build a car for a customer at the V8 Speed and Resto shop, and we're gonna put a vintage air system in it. Yes, we're dealers for vintage air, but it's not like, you know, if I have a problem, I'm not in the call tree waiting on hold to get an answer from somebody.
Yeah.
You know, I know Rick Love, the vice president, and Jack Chisenhall and the owner, and, you know, we know those guys personally. We've had experience with them on the road and worked with them for many, many years. So not that I call them for tech questions, but, you know, it's nice.
But if you got a problem, you can call them up and say, hey, I got an issue here. This is not right. What are we going to do about it?
Totally. And we always get taken care of, and we can tell the customer, you know, and it makes the customer I imagine it makes them feel a little bit more comfortable when we're telling them about here's a vintage air system, and then I can show them a video of, here's the vice president of the company tonight, and he's telling you why it's a great thing, and that's us, right. And not just some guy holding up a catalog saying, here, which one do you want? Circle it.
Pick one.
Right.
Pick one. Anyone on this side of the page, in this part of this corner, you can get that one.
Right. And having that exposure also gets us access to the newest stuff. They call me and say, hey, we got one of these coming out. If you have a customer that you can find a home for it, that'd be cool, and, whatever. So,
slick. That's good.
So, yes, you asked for it, so that was...
I did ask for it, and you delivered, my friend. Good stuff.
Well, I'm kind of glad we did, because, again, that's another one that there's so many little details of that story that, there was... Many of it left out. Some of it is not suitable for for a family PG show.
Yeah, there's that.
Nothing terrible, but
no, nothing terrible. Just some stuff is better left unsaid.
Right. So maybe on an upcoming episode we will. It's a great topic. We'll touch on how the significant other plays into your hot rod hobby or addiction, or does he or she or not, because there's lots of thoughts on that, and I was lucky enough to meet Kelly, who was part of that deal. So,
oh yeah, that's outstanding. Yeah, she's pretty pivotal in everything you got going.
More than pivotal, she's crucial. She's without a doubt, absolutely no way I could have done any of this. So,
yep, she's a good egg, that's for sure.
All right, so. We've consumed quite a bit of time here. Let's get back to the trivia question.
All right.
And what was yours?
In what year did Pontiac finally eclipse Chevrolet in production figures?
Right, and I think I said 1958.
Kevin said 1958. And for the first time, my friend, that would be incorrect.
Well... You need to tell me the story.
According to my research, that year was 1996.
Holy smokes!
And the figures were Pontiac 541,844 units to Chevrolet's 537,711 units.
I'm sorry. And let me hear those numbers again. Not
Pontiac with
just the big thousands.
Oh, 541 for Pontiac, 537 for Chevrolet.
Wow. So right there, but definitely substantial enough.
Yeah. And the big winner was Ford with just over 1 million units sold.
All right. So, and that was probably all Tauruses by then, right? 96?
Oh, yeah. I'm sure every rental agency in the world had a Taurus.
And 96, that's when the Explorers are real hot.
Yeah.
That's when that happened. So I got the bonus right.
You did. You did get the bonus right.
Wow.
And Pontiac actually held – my research only went to 2000, but it looks like Pontiac kept that lead from 96 to 2000.
Yeah. Well, those were kind of sketchy years for Chevrolet.
Yeah, rough years for GM. But in 97 was the redesign for the Grand Prix, which was a big hit for Pontiac. Like 97 to 03, I believe.
Yeah.
And they had the GTP, the supercharged 3.8-liter V6, and a lot of their stuff, which really helped performance out quite a bit.
Millions of those things out there.
The image. Oh, yeah. I had one. I loved it.
There you go. I remember the commercial.
So your question.
Well, my question was, when Pontiac was doing the promotional G-Tow or GTO Tiger, which is pronounced both ways, and they had the guy in the tiger suit against other drivers. Who was the guy in the tiger suit?
My guess was Jim Wangers.
Your guess was Jim Wangers. And the guy that they unveiled was George Hurst.
George Hurst! Oh, damn it, that's right. Oh, God dang it.
Yep.
I
so
suck.
Close, but yet so far.
Yet so far away.
Yeah.
George Hurst.
Yeah, who'd have thought?
And I knew that, too. Once you said that, I knew it.
Yep, of course. Well,
of course.
Well, now that you say it, too, I kind of figured that, yes, the 90s were great years for Pontiac because they built excitement.
They, yes, they did.
All right. Well, we've burned enough of our esteemed listeners' time, so I appreciate the chat. This was fun today.
This was fun today. Good talk.
Yeah, and boy, parts of my head are tingling because they haven't been accessed in a long time back there with a lot of those stories.
I'm glad I could help.
Yeah, it was kind of a therapy session. My apologies to Paul and everybody at Hot Rod for dragging it all up again. But all right, well, if you have any feedback about the show, you can leave it on the website at v8radio.com if you're listening to this on TuneIn Radio or on iTunes, and we'd be happy to hear from you. And until next time, man, I guess keep it under 100.
Booyah.
Booyah.